Every language has its own melody. The best way to learn it is not just by studying the rules, but by listening to the songs that a good story can tell. Today's narrative is an opportunity for you to sharpen your English listening skills in an intuitive and profound way. We open our phones in search of inspiration, a window to a world of infinite creativity. But at some point, the window becomes a mirror, reflecting only our own insecurities and the overwhelming success of others. How did the search for inspiration become the biggest source of our creative block? And how, amidst so much noise, can we go back to hearing our own melody? This is the story of David, a young musician who lost his song in the noise of digital comparison, and of the silent, analog lesson he needed to learn to silence the world and to be able, finally, to hear himself again. The Kebble. For David, a 22-year-old musician, composing was never a choice. It was like breathing. His guitar was an extension of his soul, and the melodies he created in his small room were his most honest way of communicating with the world. But recently, a new and toxic ritual had taken hold. He would pick up his guitar to compose, but before playing the first chord, the treacherous thought would come, "Let me just check something quick on TikTok for inspiration." The minute would turn into hours of passive consumption, an ocean of other musicians with perfect productions, expensive equipment, millions of views, and a success that seemed to have sprouted overnight, flooded his screen and his mind. When he finally put down his phone, the guitar on his lap felt like a stranger, a heavy and accusing object. The critical voice in his mind, fueled by comparison, was deafening. "You'll never be good enough. This has been done before, and better." The silence in his room was no longer a space of peace and creation. It was the sound of absence. The music was gone. Unable to bear the accusing silence of his own room, David left, leaving his guitar behind, like a witness to his paralysis. He walked aimlessly, feeling like an imposter in his own life, a musician who didn't make music. His walk led him to a small tree-lined square, and that's when he heard it. A flute melody, simple, pure, floating on the air. Sitting on a bench was Ismael, an elderly street musician with white hair and closed eyes. This vocal he played not for a camera, not for an algorithm, but for himself and for anyone who wanted to listen. There was a joy in his music, a soul that wasn't concerned with perfection, only with emotion. David felt a tightness in his chest as he recognized in that melody the same passion he felt he had lost forever. Moved by a mix of admiration and desperation, David approached when the song ended. David approached when the song ended. And there, to a complete stranger, perhaps because it was easier than admitting it to himself, David confessed. He spoke about the pressure, the constant comparison, the feeling that his mind was so full of other people's music that there was no room left for his own. This spoke how Ismael listened, his calm expression unchanged. When David finished speaking, the old musician simply said, "Your well is full of other people's water. There's no room for your own spring to well up. Your mind is too full, young man. You need silence. So, for 1 week, I will give you a task," Ismael continued, with a gentle authority, "a sensory fast. I forbid you from playing your instrument, and I forbid you from going on social media. Your only task is to walk through the city for an hour every day and just listen. Listen to the city's sounds, the conversations, the wind, the silence between the noises. Write down the sounds you hear, if you like, but don't create anything, just listen. Listen to David, a young man of the digital age. The suggestion sounded like a punishment, a sentence to isolation and boredom. Being without his instrument and his phone was like asking him to stop breathing. The fear of silence was almost as great as the fear of not being able to create, but the emptiness in his chest was proof that his current method had completely failed, and so, reluctantly, he agreed. The first few days of the sensory fast were torturous. The addiction to picking up his phone was a constant itch in his hands, and the silence of his instrument felt like an accusation. But, gradually, as the digital noise subsided, another kind of sound began to emerge. On his walks, David began to truly listen. He heard the rhythm of footsteps on the sidewalk, the melody of a child's laughter, the dissonant harmony of traffic. The city was no longer just noise, it was a symphony. Near the end of the week, he returned to the square and listened to Ismael play. But this time, he listened with different ears, with a clear mind, and for the first time, he didn't just hear the notes, but the space between them. This silence and the revelation hit him with the clarity of a perfect chord. Music wasn't just in the sound, but also in the pauses. It needed space to breathe, and his mind, for months, hadn't had a single empty space. At the end of the week, he returned to his guitar. He didn't think about trends, about going viral, or about what others were doing. He just closed his eyes and played, filling the silence he himself had created. This silence he himself had created. This sound, and what came from his fingers and his voice, was not an echo. It was not a song made for an algorithm. It was a release, a confession, a melody that was imperfect, honest, and finally, free. This sound, finally, free. This sound, David's journey from the infinite feed to the silent square, teaches us a crucial lesson for our noisy age. In a world that screams for our attention, silence is not emptiness. It is the space where creativity can breathe. To find your own voice, you must first give yourself the luxury of not listening to anyone else. This sound is an invitation to schedule our own sensory fast. It doesn't have to be for a week, perhaps for just 15 minutes. A time to silence the external noise, the notifications, the comparisons, the expectations, so that we can, finally, begin to hear our own internal melody. This sound, if this story about the need for silence, to find your voice resonated with you, leave a comment below, like, and share this video, so this message can find others who need a moment of peace to rediscover themselves. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that teach us how to navigate the modern world. Until next time, silence the world and listen to yourself.